Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please like and subscribe below. Aston Villa have been busy this summer already, and there's no doubt plenty more to come. To talk more about that, I'm joined today by CBS football journalist and Villa fan Jonathan Johnson. Firstly, Jonathan, what have you made of Aston Villa's summer so far?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me back on. Always a pleasure to come on and chat, Villa. I've been quite satisfied so far with Villa's summer. I think that Tielemans was a good addition. Quite opportunistic. And then obviously, the Pau Torres, rumors are quite exciting as well. But I think the thing that is most exciting at this moment in time, if you're a Villa fan, is sort of the wave of positivity that we've kind of been surfing these last couple of months. And the changes that are being put into place away from the pitch. It seems like there's a real purpose and a real vision to what Villa are trying to go about achieving, and to bring in guys like Monchi, that's a massive coup for a club like Villa. And if you told us sort of just a couple of months into last season that we'd sort of be in this position now, I think we would, as Villa fans, would have been in disbelief and shock. But now to sort of find ourselves here, it feels like even if on the surface it might seem that Villa are not necessarily the most active of clubs on the transfer front at this moment in time, the changes that have been sort of going on and taking place behind the scenes, have really been substantial. So, I think it's a really good time to be a Villa fan and to be sort of like in and around the club. And I'm curious to see now how things step up, because we all know that Monchi, got to work with Villa, from the beginning of July. So I do think that things will start to step up. We've already seen some players linked with a move away. Other players sort of, linked with moves to Villa Park. And I think sort of getting Emery and Monchi together, having them on the same page, Vidagani as well. I think we will see Villa, really sort of, start to try and make some moves over the coming sort of 6 weeks plus of the transfer window that remains.
Because you mentioned Monchi there, obviously he's a name that anybody who's followed European football and seen the success of Sevilla knows about Monchi, but also remembers his brief spell at Roma, which didn't go so well. But how sort of confident are you, with Monchi coming into Villa, that he can work some magic, particularly as he's working closely with a manager who he had great success with before at Sevilla?
I mean, I think it's it's a real positive that they have that working relationship, that pre-existing working relationship from before. The other thing that I find really curious is the Monchi's coming in a different role than he's had before. He's not sort of coming in as a sporting director where he's basically going to be in charge of sort of the ins and outs. It's more sort of like a more sort of global head of football, kind of role, which suggests that in terms of some of the transfer dealings, perhaps there is going to be greater input from other people, notably Emery himself, but also this recruitment team that's in the process of being assembled these past couple of months. So I do find that quite interesting, because it's almost as if Monchi is going to be sort of left to to sort of structure the club essentially in footballing terms, sort of set up like pathways into the senior side from youth level, but also, sort of be in charge of sort of, how big the senior squad is going to be, for example, players who can be sort of, coming in and out on loan. And that I think is something that Monchi is, absolutely specialized in over the years. And obviously Sevilla is his greatest work. But equally, people see sort of his spell with Roma as something to sort of criticize him by and sort of question his legacy because of. But equally, very, very few people in this world can boast a career where they've had nothing but success from start to finish. There's always going to be some sort of setbacks. And it's sort of looking at how sort of Monchi kind of processed those struggles that he had with Roma, because let's kind of contextualize that as well. Roma is not an easy club, to run. They have massive expectations. Then they sort of haven't sort of been known kind of in modern terms as a club that regularly wins silverware. Obviously, they've enjoyed a decent spell of success of late under Jose Mourinho in Europe. But, they've sort of not been known as sort of perennial title challengers in Serie A, for example. So, it was already quite a tricky environment, and it's not necessarily one that's gotten any easier since he left. So I don't think we should necessarily be that harsh about Monchi's time, with Roma. And the fact that he sort of went back to Sevilla and once again enjoyed a bit of success. Obviously, it was a difficult season last season, but they still managed to, ultimately salvage, some Champions League qualification by, winning the Europa League. He seems cut out to work and to excel at a club that has the kind of hopes for the future that Villa have, the sort of forward projection in terms of the project that is being assembled, and whereas Roma, there's an expectation which I'm not going to necessarily say is unrealistic, because they are at the end of the day, the capital club in Italy, so they are sort of within their rights to expect that the club would be one of the strongest in the country. But I think the Villa's aspirations at this moment in time are probably a better fit with what Monchi has achieved throughout the majority of his career than perhaps Roma was at that moment.
Yeah, totally agree with that. That was my thinking on it as well when he came in. And, Pau Torres, he's not officially signed yet, but it looks like the movement's there that he is going to sign for Aston Villa for more than 30 million. A centre-back, considering Villa's centre-backs really improved under Unai Emery in Mings and Konsa. Are you surprised Villa went for a centre-back? And, with Torres coming in left-footed, do you think he might play alongside Mings, or could it even be playing alongside Konsa?
It's an interesting one, because I think every time that anyone kind of has this conversation, they completely forget that we've got Diego Carlos as well, who was, sort of the celebrated defensive arrival, last summer. Obviously, quickly went sour because of that very unfortunate injury that he picked up, and you do have to hope that he will be able to get back to his best, but you also wonder if there is sort of a recognition at Villa that he's perhaps not going to be the same player that he was before he got injured. I think as well, sort of the interesting thing in terms of talking about Konsa is the fact that, we now have fewer options at right back. It sort of seems like if a suitable offer comes in for somebody like Matty Cash, there could be, a deal done, and Villa, perhaps look to bring in a slightly different profile of player. We know that Ashley Young has been moved on, and he's sort of, been kind of the backup in that position. But Konsa, we've known to be, a very solid, reliable performer at right back as well, and perhaps that's part of Emery's thinking, that Konsa will be a central defensive option, but equally could provide some solidity on the right side of defense. It very much reminds me of the situation that we saw at Villarreal, where you had Juan Foyth, who sort of sometimes played centre back, sometimes played right back, and I think there will be Emery looking for quite a bit of versatility from some of these players, and I wouldn't rule out as well sort of seeing a left footer, for example, perhaps even a Torres, kind of playing on the left side of defence to provide a bit more, solidity in a similar way that Konsa might be asked to do that next season. The one thing that I would say is I think the defence is a work in progress, so I think it's probably a little too early to predict who will be starting, who won't be. I think based on the way that he's performed, certainly, over the second half of last season, it would be harsh on Mings to suddenly be relegated to the bench. And I do think there will be a period where Torres sort of has to, prove himself before sort of being handed a starting 11 role. But it's going to be an interesting, first sort of couple of lineups of the new season and pre-season under Emery as well. Certain players are going to be unavailable. Unfortunately, we've just lost Ramsey as well. The under 21 Euros. So, there is going to be sort of a reshuffling of the cards, so to speak, and an opportunity to impress for some players who perhaps might feel like they sort of dropped off of the radar a little bit towards the end of last season. So whatever happens in whatever position, whether it's defence, whether it's further forward, I don't think that necessarily anything will be set in stone, sort of based on the first couple of outings that we see in the friendlies. And I think pre-season is going to be more important now than it has been in many years, given that we're going to have to go into the qualification rounds of the Conference League. So it's, a lot to be excited about, but equally, I think we're all sort of waiting now for the resumption of training, and potentially sort of the first couple of moves that, once some of these guys like Monchi get their feet under the table.
Yeah. Now, one player who formerly of Monaco, Leicester, and a Belgian international, Youri Tielemans, has signed on a free transfer. What are your thoughts on him joining Villa?
I'm cautiously optimistic. He's a player that I've rated for a long time. I used to cover the Belgian Pro League when he was coming through with Anderlecht, and then obviously covering Liga, and I saw his development a bit at Monaco as well. And then we all know what he's managed to do as part of that FA Cup winning team for Leicester as well. I think he's a good player to have. I don't necessarily know whether I can see him immediately sort of being a lock in a starting 11 position, but at the same time, like I said, there's going to be some opportunities, for players who are not necessarily part of that ideal starting 11 for Emery at the end of last season, with sort of injuries and the sort of fitness question marks you always inevitably have at the beginning of every season. And I think that Tielemans brings a lot to the table, something that's particularly useful, especially given that Villa are, we've kind of carved ourselves up this reputation of being a set piece team, is that Tielemans from set pieces is fantastic. And I think sort of having somebody who is sort of, proven to have prowess, sort of in and around the box and also delivering corners, that's a big plus, for us to sort of add to the squad at this point. And the fact as well that he didn't come with a transfer fee as well, I wouldn't look too deep into the fact that he was part of a Leicester team that went down, because I think there were a lot of players with quality better than that of a relegation team. And we knew that of Villa as well when Villa dropped into the Championship, that there were players who were better than that level, and that the relegation, based on the squad that there was on paper, shouldn't have gone down. So I think Tielemans, on a free transfer, was a shrewd bit of business from Villa, and fingers crossed there'll be a bit more of it to come this summer.
Yeah, very much indeed. And when you look at the Villa team and think about the areas where it could still improve or strengthen, where would you identify as the areas that you think Emery and Monchi will want to see the team get a bit better before the season starts?
It's not necessarily, sort of a criticism of the players that we have in those positions at the moment, but I do think that, and it's been, something that's been kind of a thorn in Villa's side for the last couple of years, is the consistency factor, certainly sort of out wide in attacking areas. Leon Bailey can be a phenomenal player on his day, but how often does he have those days? Probably not enough for the liking of most Villa fans. So I do think that perhaps, some attacking talent who has a greater level of consistency than that we've sort of been treated to at Villa Park over the last couple of years would be a welcome plus. Probably a little bit of sort of creativity and impetus going forward as well. We've heard the likes of Guendouzi linked with Villa over sort of the last couple of months, certainly since Emery arrived, but now more recently Lo Celso as well, or Lo Celso, however you pronounce it, from Villarreal. So they're quite interesting profiles. And obviously Emery knows both of the players extremely well. He seems to have identified Villarreal as perhaps a better fit with what he's trying to do than some of his other previous clubs. Like, obviously he knew Guendouzi from his time at Arsenal, but he's already identified Torres as a very good fit from Villarreal, and Lo Celso as well. Another player he's known from his time there. There were links as well with Nicholas Jackson, who's eventually gone on to join Chelsea. So yeah, I'd be keeping an eye on, especially sort of given the Spanish Spanish influx that we have behind the scenes, there would be sort of a logical sort of focus on that market, given that everybody involved sort of knows the value of those players and sort of what they can bring in terms of sort of the specific positional needs.
Right, and if Villa can get those players into sort of, I guess, add more competition in the areas that we hope they can, and with the other signings we've made, what do you think Villa could, realistically aim for this season?
I mean, I think where Villa are now in terms of the project, realistically, you have to expect things to kind of level out a little bit. I mean, I think it would be very difficult for us to maintain the kind of pace that we set since Emery's arrival over the entirety of a season. But equally, sort of having a full pre-season under their belts and getting the campaign underway under Emery, I think we can expect greater consistency, from Villa. I don't think that we'll maintain the same pace, because I know a lot of people were getting very excited about the fact that if it played out over a full season, Villa would have finished in a Champions League position based on the points picked up per game. But I think, realistically, Villa have to be targeting improvement year on year. So what are the ways that Villa can improve, this coming season on the season just gone? Obviously not start the season as slowly as we did. Fingers crossed there aren't as many injuries as well, because we know that they hampered us, pretty much from day one. But I do think that Villa should expect themselves to be a more serious cup team next season, both in terms of FA Cup and League Cup, because their potential routes into Europe. And ultimately, I think if Villa can finish in a Europa League position, then that for me is progress. I wouldn't be sort of shouting about expecting to potentially qualify for the Champions League, similar to the way that Newcastle United have done. Obviously, it would be great if that could happen, and I wouldn't totally rule it out. But equally, I think sort of the goal set should probably be a little more realistic to start with. So for me, I think that a good cup run, potentially even picking a cup and getting into the Europa League that way, either that or finishing in a Europa League qualification position via the league. I think that would represent progress for Villa, because at the end of the day, the project now is built around Villa continuing to qualify for Europe and sort of getting back there for the first time in over 10 years and getting used to being at that level again where you're playing in the league, domestically each weekend, but you're playing in Europe in midweek. That's going to take some getting used to, despite the fact that Emery obviously is extremely used to it from his previous postings. A lot of these players in the Villa squad at this moment in time will be playing European competition or continental competition for the first time in their careers. So that is going to take some getting used to. But I think based on the squad that we have on paper, I think, you could argue that Villa should really be having a good go at the Conference League this coming season, and at least sort of one of the two domestic cups. But I think probably speak for the fan base in its entirety that it's been a long time since Villa have been sort of close to potentially winning some silverware, and whatever silverware that might be, it would be really nice to sort of get to the business end of a competition, and really potentially have something to go out there and try and win.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. It's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you. It's always great to hear what you have to say about the Villa and just wider football in general. For those who don't know, where can we find you online? It is difficult these days with Twitter threads and so many things going on, but where can we find you online?
Thanks a lot for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to doing this again once the season is underway. Best place to find me still, staying very old school with Twitter at JON_Legosip, and that's where you'll find all my articles, links to podcast appearances, video, YouTube, whatever. It all basically appears there. Maybe I'll be making an appearance on Threads once we're allowed to have that in the EU. For the moment, I'll just be sticking with Twitter. But in the event that it does finally drop offline, as has threatened to be the case in the last couple of years, I'm sure I'll try to find some way to still exist under the same John Legosip moniker.